Okay, so it's 5 o'clock. I'm just going to spotlight myself for you all so that you can make sure you've got that as a large image. If you've got any questions, I'll have the chat open somewhere. Let's have a look. We've got about 40 of you in, so I'll keep the chat open up on another screen. You can put questions in. Chuck, I see a comment. Volume seems low. Maybe it's just you. How is my volume for everyone else?
Touch low.
A touch low. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use this mic today because I'm going to be wearing a mask. Um, Let me just have a little play around. I can swap it to. I
Yeah,
swap the mic just above my head. Is that any better for better for everyone?
Great stuff.
yeah, no,
That's
good.
better. Okay. And can you still hear me well enough?
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
Because I'm going to have to wear a mask today. There isn't any doubt about that. Okay. I'll just give you a little wide shot so that you can see the setup that I've got going on today. Get that off the screen. So usual setup with the lathe here, but on a little monitor arm here, I've got a small extractor fan that I've just started taking around with me to do demos, and that's going to be running today as well. That is pulling out the fumes, and there's a pipe here, a tube, extractor tube running it off down towards the door. So I'll only keep that running really while I'm doing the spraying, because I don't need it running all of the time, but there should be nice airflow running through. I'm going to be using spray paints, aerosol paints. Um, the ones I'm using are made by a company called Montana. There are lots of other ones available as well. What I've found is the slightly lower end of the market, you don't get such a good spray from your cans. Sometimes you get very wide sputtering spray from cheap cans. These work out if you look for them online. The last time I bought some for about a fiver a can, so they're not too prohibitive. What I like about these ones is that I can buy replacement caps. And if I hold that there long enough, it might just come in. You can see you can get caps that will do different volume of spray from very fine to up a bit broader. Oh, noise somewhere. Maybe I'll just repeat everyone. That noise is coming from. Okay, there we go. And why I like having caps that you can replace is because occasionally, you know how useless I am at cleaning things. I forget to spray through the bottom, turn it upside down and spray it. So this nozzle is completely blocked, but I can replace that. So why spray paint? Well, it's very immediate. It's great fun. You get some really interesting effects. I've got a few videos of this on my channel already, and in the newsletter I'll post a link to that playlist in case today doesn't satisfy your lust for wet paint. I've got some dry examples. I'm going to show you the basic technique that I use. I'm going to put some gloves on as well because I don't want paint all over my hands. And I'm going to I've got a hairdryer. I'm going to have to mechanically artificially dry stuff or speed up the drying to show you some different technique. And hopefully that buzzing noise isn't me. um, I'll just turn this mic off actually if I'm not going to be using it. Okay. So you know me, one color is never enough. I'm going to do something with a bit of black first. I guess get my can. Now I'm going to put my mask on in a moment. It is best to do this in a room really that's about 14, 15, 16 degrees centigrade. My temperature is about 9 degrees in here, so it's not ideal. Um, and the type of mask I'm about to put on and muffle the sound, you need to get one that's rated for vapor, like I've talked about before, when airbrushing. Okay, and I'll put details of the extractor I've got in the next newsletter if any of you are interested about that. Okay, so you should still be able to hear me. I'm going to put the extractor on and I'm going to cover this surface with some wet paints. I'm going to start off with some black. And I'm not too worried about even coverage. I just want to get some paint on. Then I'm going to build wet layers of paint over the top. So some yellow. Have a bit of orange. This is one of the wide sprays. You can see how wide that is. I like to put a bit of blue on as a contrast. You can see that's a very strong contrast with the orange. A little bit of block that, doesn't it? And red over the top. Bit more black. And a bit of white. And the most important bit of equipment, a bit of newspaper. Now, I'm going to show you a number of ways of bringing out the colours, but this is a very easy, simple way. Just tucking the paper onto the surface. Now, you don't want to keep putting the same bit of paper on because all of that paint will go back over the top of what's already there and it gets very messy quickly. So I'll move to another bit of paper. Fold it in. So I've got a clean surface. No more than a couple of goes, really. And then I think I'll stop it there. So I can bring you in a lot closer so you can see what effect we've got. So we get this, the colours pulling together, blending together, coming in. So even closer, you can see that we've got all the colours blended together. Now, I'd like it to be a little bit brighter. At the moment, this looks a bit dull. Please nod your head, Roger, if you think it looks a bit dull. Oh, you're shaking your head. So we can still put more paint over the top. If you don't like what we've got, put some more on. And that's what I like about this as a technique. It's really good fun just playing around. I feel like a graffiti artist. I feel so young. Get a bit more of our bright yellow. So we come back, I get a fresh piece of newspaper. I just lightly put it on, give it a little bit of a twist, and then pull it off. And we've got very different kind of effect now. I quite like that look, but I'm going to do something down here. If you put it flat, you'll get, larger patterns. If I crumpled it up, I could get a different effect. I'm just going to do a little crumple. And I'm going to stop there.
So quite a different look. You can do the whole surface or you can go in and do particular areas. That looks very nice and abstract. And remember, of course, once it's dry, you get your wooden edge. It can look very different. Okay. I'm going to do slightly different effects now, so I'm going to put some more colour on. And move a bit of a shade. And darker blue over the top. Now, there are other ways that we can pull out the colour. I did the first one with some newspaper. You can do this with a craft stick, a piece of wood. I've just got an artist's palette knife here. And if I just lightly put that on the surface, I can start pulling through the other colours. Again, give it a clean. If you don't like what's happening, try another technique. A little straight, little radial lines. There's something coming through. Pressing a bit harder. Get a different look. Overlap them a bit. You get a little join between the two colours. And you'll need to keep changing your piece of cloth so that you've got a dry one. Or sorry, one that's clean. So I just swap, get another bit ready. In there. And white. In there. And white. Now, what I would suggest as a useful variation on the way I'm doing it is it's better to do this flat. You can see here we've got a little bit of the paint running. If you have it flat, that's not going to be a problem. Right, I'll show you what it's like with a wooden stick. You just get a wooden craft stick. And just do very similar things. Push the paint. Have it flat, you won't get those runs. And those runs can be quite effective. So this is just a way of blending some different colours together. This I'm pressing a little harder and pulling through all these lovely blues and blending them into some textured surface. Let's give it a clean. I've got quite a lot of paint on there now. I like this dripping running together. If we just go lighter, you get less coming off. It's still very wet, the paint, so we can come back and work through another area.
So you've got quite a lot of variation there in the look. I think on my preferred bit is round here, where we've got some of the orange colours coming through. There are a number of other things that we can try. It's got a lot of paint on it now, and it would take a long time to dry that off. The best way if you're playing around and you want to try techniques is to use a bit of newspaper to remove as much paint as possible. Just rubbing that on, pulling it off. That's an interesting kind of look. You might want to sort of stop at that point and think, oh, I'm going to use that as the base. And I will be showing some techniques you can do over the top of the paint as well. I'm going to just take a bit more of that off. Take it back to a dryish bit of wood. And show you another technique that we can use. Yeah, I think I'll do this with orange. This covers very quickly.
Right. This white nozzle could do with being changed, I think. I might do that in a minute. Put a new nozzle on. Better. Okay, so we've only got
A couple of colors on this one. I'll just do a little demonstration with the side of the stick. If you leave the paint a little longer, it gets a little bit sticky and tacky, and then it's not quite so runny. But you can just do little edge pulls, pulling through. This is only 2 colors. Remember, I've done this with several colors before, and it gets you get a nice effect coming through. My favorite one really though is the newspaper pulling. But we'll see here we're building up and trying to keep it the same rough sort of angle. Not so much is coming off. I can pull it all the way around to the edge. And this, apart from the fact it's a horrible orange, Roger, sorry, is a bit more of a delicate, subtle kind of effect. You could do this with stronger contrasting colors. You know, have a black as the top, and maybe I'll just do some of that round on another part of it. In terms of drying, these paints will usually need to dry at least overnight, if not a bit longer. But there we go. I'll do about a third of it like this, and then I'll change it up a little bit. Clean off our stick. You can get different effects, different patterns with whatever you press into the paint. If I press in a circle, it does raise the paint. You do get an uneven surface a bit, which I will talk about what I do with that a little later on when I show you some finished examples. This, I don't want it to be, you could do something where you just sort of make it separate circles. I just don't think that looks as interesting as building up this pattern over the top. A little twist. Yeah, and I'll just go around about a third of the blank doing this. Putting little twists in as well. Putting through a bit more of the darker colour. And that's given perhaps a bit of time for it to dry off a little bit. Let's clean that off for later. And try again with the flat stick. Let's see, with fewer coats of paint, how that works. We could just use that the sort of tip of the stick to put a little indent in, something, mixing it up a bit different, playing around, trying out ideas. We want to press hard. You don't have to do them all at the same angle. You could go for something a bit bolder, a bit more. Something a bit messier. I'm not sure I like that bit that I've just done, but I like these wide patterns and that blocky pattern going on. I think I prefer that better than this bit. But you can see in what I'm doing that I'm just trying things out, seeing what I like, seeing what I don't like. And what I like from this, I do like the radial line pattern. I think that works quite effectively. And I like the flat stick impression here. The circles come off okay. If I had my heat gun with me, there's a great thing to do where you put a few layers of paint on. I'll put it in the newsletter. And if you put the pipe through the layers of paint and then put a heat gun on, it blisters through and you get really wonderful look. Okay, so spray paint, it's not enamel. No, it is I think it's some sort of acrylic medium. The problem is that the writing on it is so low, I can't read it very well. It's Montana Colors, matte paint, quick drying. I can't see the word acrylic on it anywhere, but it is you know, all the safety warnings on there about protecting your lungs and it being flammable. Do observe those. And it's a matte paint, so it dries very flat. I've got some examples to show you in a moment. Randy, try mixing a few of the stick half moon shapes into the circles. Yeah, nice idea. That's exactly what I like doing, just trying out some different techniques, playing around. What happens if it's actually getting a little bit too dry, I think. But that's got some nice texture. I'll bring you in closer on that bit. And I think that's what I like about this as a technique, is that you've got layers of paint, you can mix them, pull through colors, you get an interesting texture. It's not going to give you a super smooth surface, as I've mentioned a couple of times already. The other thing is, you know, this has to be flat for the stick to make good contact. I'm pressing quite hard now because that is beginning to dry off. But you could do something. You could do you could do an edge. So around here where I've got my radial lines, I could say, okay, I want to mix that up a little bit, have a wide border at the edge, and work that round. Just as a, as an example, a bit of playfulness. Let's pull you out slightly wider. Okay. Now, I'm just going to move on to a different one. So I'm going to put the mask back on. This is blue. Another nozzle that's a bit bunged up. You can see I'm just spraying over and it's picking up the texture from what was already there. That's not a problem.
It's only a little more controlled. I just roll up a flat bit of paper towel. You've got to keep changing again to a clean bit. I just roll that, change to another clean bit. Start there, roll it around. I like these little bits of colour pattern that is appearing there. Might need to be time for a fresh piece of paper. Let's see if I can get a bit more of another cleanish bit here. I went a little hard, I think, with that one. Oh, that one works better, I think. Come back to another bit. Okay. Gloves are getting a bit dirty. I'm just going to give it a little dry. And a bit of heat on this, and then I want to show you something else. It'll probably take a minute or two to get this dried off. So bear with me while it dries. Put some pears in. Okay.
Might be a little ambitious trying to dry it with a hairdryer in the time that we've got. So I'm going to give that a few moments to dry while I show you some dry ones from earlier goes. Let's fix that there. So here is it's a rather thick blank, but it's something you can sort of use and play around with. Let's come in a bit closer. So this was just done with the newspaper pull. It'll come into focus in a moment. Just like you saw me do. When it's dry, the paint goes down a little bit. It's not flat. I can feel little undulations in it, but it dries matte. You can see here obviously the colors are quite clear. I think of this as sort of like decaying autumn leaves on blue lake surface. But we'll use this to try some ideas, because I think the one on the lathe is going to take a little bit too long to dry. I always say as well that when you've got a colouring effect, you want to make sure before you think whether it's any good or not, then you know, get your wooden center. So here's one coloured in exactly the same way. Let's just come out a little bit. That's a bit zoomed in, perhaps. And flattened bits of newspaper. One or two places where I've given it a little twist as it's come off. Same colours. Again, if there's an area where you don't like how it's come off, just put a little bit more of the paint on it. But then when you've got your border to it, I think that makes a big difference. Although it's quite a busy blank, this one, I really would have preferred a sort of a cleaner inside, really. And then, of course, you get a finish on it. Now, this surface, if you sand this, of course, you run the risk of sanding through the color and changing the pattern and the effect that you've got. A little light sanding, you can generally get away with that, because I think they look even better once you get the finish on them. So here's one. If I just turn it around, you can see I've got a lacquer finish on here, and the difference between the two, there's no finish on the lower one, but this one with lacquer on, you get that lovely shine, and I've now got a smooth surface. And there's a video in the playlist I'll be sending you that shows how I achieve this. It's basically a few coats of gloss lacquer, then rub down, cut back. If you want to cut back with burnishing cream or wet and dry sanding paper, or if you want to use one of the carb body rubbing compounds, you can do that. Then put some more lacquer on, and so on. You keep building that up. If you want to go beyond a lacquer finish, something a bit thicker and that will even out even without having to do a lot of sanding down, then something else you can try is using resin. So I'm not into casting blocks of voids and putting colored resin and things into them, but this is a paint pull effect that I've done a centrifuge over. So, you know, you don't have to leave it at that. You can say, you know, that's the background. I want to do something else over it. And that's what we'll be coming to in a little while. So we've got all these color going on behind it. It's a bit subtler perhaps than the one underneath it. But putting the centrifuge on brings another dimension to it. And I have to say that the resin, I think, gives a more of a sort of a appearance of a glass-like surface. It still needs a little bit of polishing. You can see there we've got a few little lines in the resin itself. But this is great where your paint has got a little bit of a texture in it and you don't want to sand it down. If I sanded down those black lines that are quite thin, they would just completely disappear. If I put a gloss lacquer on it, the gloss lacquer mirrors the surface, so it would be a little bit uneven still. So this was a polyurethane resin I mixed up and had it flat. The middle wasn't turned out. I had a little channel turned here, and then I put the resin on with a foam brush, making sure I got it right to the edges. And then it's just a case of letting it settle and leaving it, and then turning out the middle and removing any excess that drained in. There's a little slope on it here. These two are sort of closer, more finished versions of the techniques that I've just been showing you. So this was black, yellow, red, and then white. I'll bring you in really close. I think that one will bring you in a bit closer to see some of that coloring texture. So this is a bumpy surface. It's not smooth at all. I would think if I sanded it down, I would lose the definition of it. But this I did with bits of kitchen roll pressed into the paint and lifted up. Now I left it a little bit longer than I've shown you in the demo today. Those were really to sort of show you how simple the technique is. But if you leave the paint a little longer to dry, then you don't get it moving as much and getting the runs in that I was having. And then this one underneath it, this is in sort of various stage of completion. This one was done with the blue spray paint that I showed you, and then I think I did it with one of these palette knives, just on the edge, lifting up. Again, leaving it a little longer, giving it maybe 10 minutes or so before I start pulling around the paint. And I think you get a very different quality of paint finish from doing this. It's not the same as acrylic paint pours that people do and mix silicone in and get cells and things appearing, or they do it, they put the paint on and then do a wipe with something like a palette knife across it. I find those a little bit hit and miss in the couple of goes I've had with them, whereas this is something that I find a little bit more controllable, and also I don't think it uses as much paint up. You could try it. I mean, it's very difficult to do without using aerosol paints, but you know, spray can paints. You could, if you thin the paint down with flow medium, you might be able to, on smaller pieces, pour coats of paint over the top of each other. But I find every time I see someone do that, I see so much paint coming over the sides. I just think, wow, that's a lot of paint. This is just one coat, and we don't have paint falling off the edges. So this one, I didn't quite get the color pulled all the way through to the edges. You can see up here that rim edge is a little bit suspect. But I wanted to just show you these finished examples as ideas for what it can look like when you do it not at breakneck speed. Right. So let's come back to our one here and see. I'm not sure. I might get away with it. Let's just do one more little 30 seconds heat. Okay, come on to the overhead. What I'm going to do is mix up some black acrylic paint in a rather grubby palette. I put the extractor back on to keep pulling fumes away and out of the shed. I'm going to put a little bit of flow medium in with it just to make it go a little bit further and have it flow better. So about half and half. I think I'm going to use this quite wide, rather cheap brush. And this might not, I might pull this off, I might not. I think it depends how dry the paint really is. I'm not convinced it's dry enough, but I'll try this first. I'm going to just pick one area because, like I say, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be the finished surface. You can still try other things on it. And I'll put a bit of tape across there. Bit of tape across there. Another bit across there. Right, so I've got the black on the palette. I'm just brushing a lot of it off. It's not quite dry brushing, but I'm just going to paint inside those lines. It's a little scratchy, this brush. I've gone a bit too wide, but we'll see what it looks like. I want to sort of feather that edge out. Yeah, I needed a better quality paintbrush and dry surface to work on. But we'll see. It might have worked, it might not. So very gently, I haven't stuck this down super hard. It is pulling a little bit of the paint away. It is a little bit wet still. That's one shape. Let's do another one. And go for something a little bigger. And I'll try this with a wider, softer brush. I think it might possibly even be a makeup brush. That's a bit too wide. Let's swap it for a different one. And a little more paint needed. So I'll just mix this up quickly. The lid on. We're not going to go on. A little bit of flow medium. So slightly better quality brush. This is a flat brush. Probably should have used it to begin with. Let's see how this one goes. I got a bit carried away and went past too far there. Never mind. A little bit more. Let's do that. We'll just repeat the mistake everywhere. See what happens. Right. A little ragged. One last go with the black. And I'll do these 3 of these on the outside. Paint on. Run it along. One edge. 2 edges.3 edges. So I'm using the paint in the background as a way of breaking it up into different views. And you can see where I made the mistakes, where I went across the edge of one of the lines of tape, which I would need to correct. But let's move on to the next color. Do this in a different palette so I don't get it mixed up with the black. A little bit of white. paint. Bowl. Let's get a brush and some flow medium. And then mix up. This is good TV. White paint in a white palette dish that you can't see. Leave that there. Just going to do a few lines of white, similar way. Get most of the paint off the brush. And what I could do to give me a crisp edge, I've forgotten this bit, but I can do it between two lines. Tape. Right, a bit more paint. Chance of it being a little more even and neater looking. Neatness is very important to me. I'm just going to put a little bit of heat on there. Might be, like I said at the start, it's a bit cold in here. The paint really likes to have a bit warmer conditions to dry in. Yeah, that hasn't worked very well. The alternative, which I have in my cupboard, let me just get it. It is not in my cupboard. No, so the alternative is chalk marker pens that people use. They use in bistros to do their restaurant menus. I'm going to have to persevere with the paint, even though it's not drying very well. Do one more line of it there. All the time I'm spending waiting between doing this, the paint is getting a little bit drier, but it's a sort of rather rustic, crude effort today. I was lulled into a full sense of security with sitting in the sun with a cup of tea with my wife only about an hour ago, and it was baking hot. We're just building up the idea of patterns and shape, something a little bit abstract. I like the busyness of the background, but I like as well being able to break it up. Really, you're just watching me have a bit of fun playing around with an idea that's I'd say the idea is better than the execution today. I'm going to keep going because that's it's a cumulative effect. That is garish, isn't it? Right, we've got an area around here. I think I'm going to do another one through there. One thin line. Now, I haven't been sticking the tape down hard at the edges because of the wet paint behind it. That would obviously give a crisper line. As the paint is getting a little drier now, if I can get away with that, but this is definitely one that isn't going to be a keeper. but the edges now are getting, can you see that edge there is looking a lot sharper. Just putting wet paint on top of wet paint is not a brilliant idea. I should have known better. Let's do that one. There. A little bit of paint on the brush. Run it across. Now, I think for demonstration purposes, I'm going to stop there and give it a little bit of heat, because there is another step we can take this. And that isn't to spray it all black again, honest. Another 8 minutes to go. Just want to get it as dry as possible in the middle for when I put a gouge on it. Right. It might be dry enough. We'll find out in a moment. Right, in here I have a few stickers. So I'm sort of bringing over something I've shown when I do airbrushing demonstrations. Just going to get these brushes out of the way. Where mask off areas and then spray around them. I've got some rather large circular stickers. I'm hoping that they won't pull the paint off when I remove them, but what I'm looking for now are areas that look a bit more interesting, and I'm going to preserve those areas. I think that bit there could be, cover that up. I'm not pushing down too hard. Ideally, I'd like to leave it a few hours to dry off, but there we go. That's the ideal. And let's have one up here. I think that looks a bit interesting. And cover that over. Move on to some slightly smaller ones to go in the gaps between them. So I'd like to get some of that black and some of that white. I'm going to do one that size. Again, just lightly push down. Really, you want it a dry surface so you can stick it with a little bit more force than I'm using. One more there. So I'm sort of looking at intersections of different patterns and shapes. I could probably do a larger blue one there, but I think I'm going to do a yellow one. And I've got some other ones. This could be a complete disaster and put you all off coming back for a free Zoom event. I hope not. What have we got? 5 minutes. One more there. So I'm trying to preserve quite a bit of the patterns and the color from underneath. That's empty. No, it's not empty. And I've got room here for one that I combine those three elements. And let's put one here that'll get some of that. So I want to look now and look at the sort of the coverage. And we've got a couple of gaps here, bit of a gap there and there. I've got some slightly smaller ones. I mean, I could have gone all minimal and just done one and large sticker and left it at that. But when you're working on ideas and playing around, I think it's always best to go a little bit over the top. At least that's how I go about things. Let's turn that off. There aren't any more spray fumes in the room. I can hear myself think now. That's nice. Yeah, as I say, I will in the newsletter put a link to the extractor I've got here. I'm looking at some better quality industrial ones that will that I might spend a bit of money on. Haven't quite decided what one to go for yet. Right, I think one more, and then I'll put you out of your misery, and we'll cover up that background. Right, let's move these stickers out of the way. Brush that needs to go indoors for washing, and it's a little bit quicker drying. I'm going to put some ebonizing lacquer on, so mask is going back on,
And the extractor's going back on. Give it a bit of a shake. Right, we need to dry that a little bit before we peel them off. In comes the hairdryer.
so while that's drying off, there was another little variation I just want to show you an example of, if it will come into focus. So this one here, hopefully you can see we've got little dots of color coming through. What I did with this area, and I haven't got time to show you today, but maybe I'll do a proper YouTube video on it, was just spray some WD-40 on the wood before I put the paints on. And that splits the paints and let the different colors come through without me doing anything. Here's an example with just two colors, black and red, not showing up brilliantly well. But maybe I'll do a YouTube video of this in the week. Bare wood, WD-40. I think I did the black paint first and then the red paint. And all these little pockets of black come through, pop through from underneath. I didn't have to do anything, no manipulation of the surface with paper or a palette knife or anything like that. Right, let's see. This will give us some idea perhaps of the effect, but as I say, it might be a little messy. Right, I'm going to use a knife just to get under there. It's not really particularly dry, so we're not going to have crisp edges, unfortunately. I'll go with the smaller dots first. Yeah, I mean, that ebonizing lacquer is still pretty wet as well. But as a way of being able to get a complex looking finished rim, I think this combination of the paint pulling and the masking is a good way of doing that. Other ways I've seen graffiti street artists do this, again, they're working with it flat, is just using can lids, jam jar lids or spray can lids, different sizes, just put down on the surface and sprayed round. But really, we need a lot more time to do this and have it. I've probably done a bit too much, but that won't surprise any of you, will it? Unless it's your first time here, in which case, welcome and thank you very much for signing up to the newsletters and coming along. I'm struggling with fitting an April one in because I'm actually demonstrating at clubs every Saturday in April, so it may have to be a different day of the week. Oh, I like that one. Couple of that size round here to go.
Stuart, can you change the camera?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We'll try. There we go. That's a bit more interesting, isn't it? Thank you for telling me. So I think they're a bit too close together, those ones. I need to come back a bit further, don't I? Let's go on to the tailstock. Let's go there so you can see a bit more. Right. So, I mean, it's lifting some of the other paint with it, which is not ideal. And then these last two massive stickers. Yeah, can you see we've gone down to some of the paint that was there in previous layers. And this is stuck very firmly, this sticker. Just got an edge. Okay, so I like the idea that we can see, you know, the shapes, the lines of paint that went on. They needed to be a little neater, but you know, for a quick 15-minute, let's just try this as an idea. I think it's not worked too horrifically badly. A little bit of English understatement there. Let's make a bit of space. So, like I was saying, it might have been better if I just done one and then the rest of it black. That could be quite a nice statement. But I think framing them, masking them off in this way, and just letting bits of them come through. I think I've done too many. I think it would have been better to have had fewer circles. Nod your head if you agree with me, or shake your head if you don't. And again, we'd need to see an edge next to it. I will just put an edge on it. Hopefully that paint is not so wet it's going to give me a little sort of plug of wet paint on the tip of my gouge. If it does, I'll make sure I clean it off straight away, because if you don't, that wet paint can take a while to get rid of, or when it's dry, it becomes very hard to get rid of. Let's put the hair dryer out of the way. That high. And let's do it with a gouge I don't mind too much about. Try this one. I don't want to spin it too fast and throw wet paint everywhere. I'll just get a wooden center Oh, we've gone over a few minutes. We're nearly done. This is a very misshapen gouge. With most of it, that's a bit of a sharp point on it. Let's just clean that up now. Okay, that will do just for demo purposes. Wow, I've said this lots of times, always get yourself a wooden edge next to what you've made so that you can have a better idea of what it looks like. And that suddenly for me improves it. Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, there's lots of possibilities with this. Obviously, it needs to be a warmer room, let the paint dry, and be a bit neater with your brush strokes, or use the chalk pens or paint pens. Um, but it's nice. I've been meaning to do something like this for a while, and it's nice to have an opportunity to do that with you, and you watch me playing with an idea. It's quite different from the other ones that I showed you earlier. I think it's got potential. This is a not very good rendition of it, as I said earlier on. Thank you, Terry. Lots of ideas to try for sure. Um, other ones I've done it where I've done the background. I put lots of lines of tape across and made sort of grid patterns playing with it. There are, oh, thank you very much. In haste, thank you. Thank you, Walt. Thanks, Anne. Um, Again, that's in the list. I've got about 7 spray paint videos on YouTube. This is the first time I've done this particular thing. So you were here when it happened first. Um, but yeah, I don't think this is worth me letting dry and finishing brilliantly. But I'll see. I'll leave it on the lathe. Maybe tomorrow when it's properly dry, I might be able to just give a little bit of a sand to it and see what it looks like. Um, but I like the way it sort of got a continuation of the design underneath it, but we're seeing it in through little windows. But I think there should have been fewer of them with maybe a few more gaps between them. Anyway, if you have anything you want to say about this, obviously the chat is about to finish. Then get in touch with me. And if you have a go at this and do it better than me, which wouldn't be hard, then send me some pictures. Oh, thank you, Mary Alice. Thank you. So thank you, Harvey. Oh, you enjoyed the brushing one as well.